We're back on Boston has entered the chat live from our Salem 5 studios. Adam Kaufman always loves to give out the phone number, and we love to hear from you. I know Lucy loves to hear from everybody as well, but did you guys hear what happened today in Miami?
You're not going to give out the phone number? You're just going to tease it like that?
617-582-CHAT. 2428 is the chat. Is how you spell that one. Well, I was leaving it. That was you. That's your job.
I didn't know I was supposed
Normally,
to jump
you
in.
generally do that. Yeah. Hey, did you hear what happened today, though? Miami, they gave up, I don't know, a lot of guys, and they have a lot of money to spend. One of them, Tyreek Hill, who's coming off an injury after releasing a bunch of guys.
Yeah, it's going to save him about $23 million. Ooh.
This, of course, from Carlos, who's all over it. No, the Patriots should not be in the market for Tyreek Hill. In the words of Mike Vrabel, we're looking for the better, younger, cheaper player every day. I don't know about that guy.
What about a talented
Be
player?
in the better category. He's certainly not younger or cheaper. He's 2 weeks out from turning 32.
Can't be dismissing.
It's an old cat.
Old.
It's an old cat. It's football old. It's football old, Lucy.
Well, listen, I like a cheetah. All right, we all like cheetahs. Let's hear what Christopher Price has to say about it. He of the Boston Globe. What do you think about that, Chris? The Tyreek Hill's release. Could the Patriots maybe have some interest? Maybe he's, the lower contract, the injury. They just saw it with Stephon Diggs. Why not Tyreek Hill?
No. No, not at all.
And
I don't
thanks
want
for
any
coming.
part of Tyreek Hill if I'm the New England Patriots. The one guy who was cut loose today by Miami, who I would certainly keep an eye on, is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who goes back to the Tennessee days with Mike Vrabel. Not necessarily an overwhelming offensive option, but the kind of guy who I think is a Vrabel guy, for lack of a better term. Special teamer, add some depth at the wide receiver position. I don't know what sort of financials we're talking about here. This is a guy who's probably on the back nine, and I don't know how he would fit with the current group of receivers that they have in Foxborough, but that's definitely a name to keep an eye on.
Where do you think Tyreek Hill is going to end up? Do you think he will just end up back with the Chiefs?
That's the one.
At any
right
time?
There.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the best course of action for him moving forward. He knows the head coach. He knows the quarterback. He knows the system. It would be one of those natural fits. I don't want to compare it to Deion Branch coming back to New England in, 2010, but it would just seem to be a really good fit for him at this stage of his career. They know who he is. They would have a realistic level of expectation when it came to his overall skill set, what he could bring to the table. He brings another layer to that wide receiver room that really right now desperately needs it. So, yeah, I think that would make the most sense for both sides.
Well, let's stay in division for a second. Before we even get to the Patriots, let's keep talking about the Dolphins. No Hill, no Westbrook-Ikhine. You mentioned Bradley Chubb is out the door. I mean, Tua would be in the unemployment line too, if not for the dead cap situation. So we can look around and say, okay, Buffalo's going through change. They got a new coach. Miami, coach, roster, GM. The Jets obviously need to figure out their quarterback situation. New England kind of looks like the only team that's got it figured out at the moment. I mean, if you're power ranking these teams as we sit here, not even at the start of the free agency and draft and all that, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at New England as number one and Buffalo as 1A. I wouldn't completely dismiss the Bills, even though they did turn over, their coaching staff. Well, to some extent, Brady's still there, but as long as you have the reigning MVP or what used to be the reigning MVP in Josh Allen, I think that still makes you at least at the very worst the number two team in that division. And then you have the Dolphins and the Jets kind of fighting for the scraps. At this point, it's New England's division to lose, and that's even with the added expectation going into 2026, a tougher schedule, all of that. I think New England is still easily the best team in this division, and by default, they're the one playoff team we know that can emerge from that division.
Chris, Stephon Diggs, we know about his contract. He's got a $6 million bonus coming up in March. Just long term, he had a good year. He's off the injury. Generally, those guys in their second year are much better, but he is 33 years old. How do you see it playing out with him and just the wide receiver position in general? Is Mac Hollins another guy that's one and done, considering that's been the story of his career?
Let's make sure we don't make Diggs to it. Yeah, I believe he's 32 right now. He'll be 33 next year.
Apologize.
Aging him.
Exactly. Yeah. Look, I would love to be able to keep Steph Diggs around for all of those reasons, including the fact he's one of the more well-respected guys in the wide receiver room. He really became a leader for that group. I think as long as things are going well around here, you keep him around. If the milk starts to spoil, then, you got to figure out a way out of that contract. So I would love to be able to, again, figure out a way to keep him around, but work the money such that you spread it out a little bit. You don't have that lump sum right now. You spread it out, you mess with the years a little bit. I do everything I can do to keep Matt Collins around. Matt Collins is one of those great locker room guys whose worth is not necessarily measured in numbers, but it's measured in, leadership and just kind of a tone setting guy in the locker room. I would keep him around on a relatively short deal. Look, again, Joe, I think you bring up a good point. You're talking about 2 wide receivers on the other side of 30. This is a room that needs to get a little bit younger, but I would try and get as much as I could out of those 2 guys, at least when you're talking about the 2026 season.
What do you think they're going to do with Christian Barmore? Because he has his legal issues off the field. The Patriots' statement about those issues didn't seem as supportive as it was for Stephon Diggs, and maybe it's reading into something that's not there. But is he a guy they want to keep around?
Lucy, I would very quietly make some phone calls around the league and just kind of maybe gauge the potential trade market for him with an eye toward doing something on draft weekend. Look, if you can get a second, I don't think you can get a second for him, but if you can get a second, a third, I may make that move if I'm more aggressive either in the draft or free agency when it comes to acquiring a defensive tackle. Look, Christian Barmore, we all know the very serious real world allegations that are, that he's up against at this point. I'm just looking at it through a purely football lens. This is a guy who is very difficult to replace on the field. And so if you do decide to move on from him, you need to have some sort of insurance there. I don't know if they believe that someone like Corey Durden is going to be able to help recreate him in the aggregate, to use the Moneyball term. But I think that you can start to make a few phone calls and kind of gauge the market. And if there are people who are interested in him out there, then I would entertain the possibility of making a deal.
I want to bring this back, Chris, to wide receiver, because I have, not that I don't like Diggs, and again, great season, especially coming off the injury. I just think he's going to be gone. I think he comes along with a certain level of baggage, whether it was the pink substance in the bag before the season, all the Cardi B drama, and obviously the allegations that he's dealing with right now concerning the personal chef. Now, postseason, it's just, he tends to wear out his welcome, unfortunately. We've seen it time and time again throughout the NFL. Matt Collins, I would love to see back. I think he's a producer, he's a chain mover. But beyond that, in the scope of getting younger, we know Drake May needs weapons. So in terms of pass catchers, where are you looking?
Looking in the draft or in free agency, there are no elite level guys out there, in my experience, when you talk about the draft and you talk about the back end of the first round. There's a handful of guys in free agency that you could start to consider. If you want to wish upon a star, maybe you think about, instead of trading for Max Crosby, maybe you take those picks and you give Minnesota a call and ask them about Justin Jefferson. There's some possibilities out there, but I think in this case, my reasoning might be the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Now, I understand that. I say that with a full knowledge that, look, things start to kind of turn for Diggs in his second year, and you want to be out of the Steph Diggs business, a year too early as opposed to a year too late. So I think it all goes into the conversation at that wide receiver position. They have a number of questions moving forward, not just with Diggs and Hollins, but how do you want to fill out the back end of that rotation? And again, we mentioned Nick Westbrook-Ikine, guys like that. It's going to be a really interesting offseason for them when you talk about that position in regards to the Patriots.
Chris Ashton Grant sticking around, could have got the offensive coordinator job. Staying in New England, how important is that for both Drake May and Josh McDaniels to have that all still together next year?
Love it. Love it. If I'm a Patriots fan, I love that. One of the things that you need around Drake is a level of consistency. This is a guy who's had a lot of different offensive coordinators, a lot of different head coaches, a lot of different, a couple different quarterback coaches going all the way back to the University of North Carolina. You need to be able to have the guys around him to create kind of a scaffolding to allow him to grow, to allow him to develop. And if you can keep the same voices in his ear, year in, year out, I think that's nothing but good things when you talk about the development of the young quarterback specific to the passing game.
Do you think they will end up extending Christian Gonzalez? And
yes.
What do you think that contract is going to look like?
It's a great question at this point, because it could go one of two ways. There's high end, and I think that, I always think back to the old Mo Vaughn thing. The meter's running. It's you got to get it done sooner rather than later. And so They need to be able to nail that thing down. I don't think it's the first priority this offseason, but it's one of the first priorities that they need to deal with. It was funny, Lucy. I was kind of lukewarm on him over the course of the regular season, and then we get to the postseason, and you see what he's been able to do, or what he was able to do in that Denver game against San Diego, against the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. You can't go wrong with a number one corner. I know he's going to be incredibly expensive, and you have to figure that into look. Are we going to make a play for Max Crosby, and are we going to extend some of these guys? But he's at the top of the list, if not the number one guy you have to deal with this offseason when it comes to a new deal.
I think people keep forgetting, honestly, why would we talk about it at this point? But if you had that guy early in the season when he missed time to begin the year, I mean, this might have been a 16-win regular season team. I don't think you lose to Pittsburgh. You certainly don't lose to Vegas. That's how I see it anyway. So, yeah, he's important. But as we know, they need help at wideout. They need help along the offensive line. They need help on the edge. There are other spots that you can look at as well. What is the number one priority?
Edge rusher at this point. It's specifically someone who's going to be able to get after the quarterback on a consistent basis. Look, I love Caleb on Chason, and maybe he's that guy. Maybe you go all in on him and you focus your financial priorities elsewhere. You're able to bring him back. But you need to be able to find a guy who can get you double-digit sacks year in, year out, whether that's Max Crosby, whether you think that might be Chason if you give him a full season, 17 games, 70% of the snaps, whatever the case may be. It's a really good draft for guys who are on the edge, for pass rushers. And so that's part of the conversation as well. But you have to be able to get better pressure on the quarterback. You need to be able to find complementary guys to Tonga, Williams, Barmore. If you can slide someone in there like a high-level player, maybe a Max Crosby, or you spend that 31st pick on the best edge rusher available, you can take that defense from here to here, and then you can help. That gives you help out on the back end. But I think right now, Adam, I think the number one priority on this team is a pass rusher.
Tell me if you disagree, but along those lines, and I agree with everything that you just said, I feel like the Super Bowl in particular the last couple of years has told us a story about just how you win today in the NFL. And I know there's the old adage to defense wins championships and all that, but more specifically, I feel like it's won in the trenches. Patrick Mahomes last year against the Eagles, his life was made miserable. He couldn't do anything in that game. We saw what just happened to Drake May against the Seahawks front. I don't know. Is this an area that is maybe less highlighted when it comes to team building that feels like almost, if you are really strong in the trenches, particularly along the defensive line, it feels like if you have representative offense and secondary to go along with it, it's a cheat code to a playoff run?
Yeah, I don't think you're completely wrong there. I will say this. It's still a quarterback-driven league. Even though we're sitting here, a week after Sam Darnold ended up winning the Super Bowl. So, take it for what it's worth. But this is still a quarterback-driven league, and you still need good, solid, consistent quarterback play. But, yeah, I call it the Philadelphia model, the Howie Roseman model, where it's just you build from the inside out. So you can lose a guy like Philadelphia did. You can lose Milton Williams, and you still have a terrifying defensive front. If you build from the inside out, and I'm including the offensive line in that conversation as well, if you are solidified in the trenches, if you're able to get guards, defensive tackles, offensive tackles, centers, just if you can build your depth up front, honestly, that camouflages, kind of to your point, I think, camouflages a lot of other deficiencies you might have up and down the roster. So, yeah, I agree with you on that point that, look, it's the Philadelphia model. And if you're able to perfect it in a lot of ways, like Philadelphia has been able to do it for the better part of the last couple of years, you're going to be successful. But I still think at the end of the day, you need good, consistent, competent quarterback play.
Chris, it's President's Day. I think we should talk about the president of the Patriots and Jonathan Kraft. What a big turnaround, huh? From last year to this year. He's done an excellent job. I know he's, as part of his father's decision to move on from Gerard Mayo, but I don't know. We're talking about presidents in this town. I think Jonathan Kraft's had himself a great year.
He did okay. I'll give him that, man. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he did okay. I think the Patriots it's remarkable, Joe. I do a mailbag for WEI.com, going back to Rob Bradford, going back to the days that over on Guest Street. I do a mailbag for the Boston Globe, and almost every question last year was about, fan unrest and, what can I do? I want to turn in my tickets, my season tickets. How do I express my disgust? And now it's all about, who's going to play left tackle going forward? What's the window for Drake May? And what's the sense of urgency when you have a rookie quarterback on a contract? So, look, that reflects well on the front office. It also honestly reflects well on the ownership group. I think they did have a pretty good year.
We also reacted to some conversation at the end of last week. Actually, at WEI, one of the producers there brought this topic up of, would you rather have had the Patriots lose in the playoffs or lose in the Super Bowl in that embarrassing fashion and embarrass themselves in the Super Bowl, or exit the postseason earlier, which we kind of universally agreed was dumb because, of course, you'd want them to make it to the Super Bowl. But where do you fall on that?
Any experience in the postseason is good experience. Anytime you can get even a single snap more in the postseason to prepare you for what you might face down the road, especially when you're talking about a young quarterback in Drake May. Get him all the postseason snaps you can and have him understand that, look, it's different football and it's a different animal and it's a different kind of game. And so I am of the opinion that it's go as far as you can go. It's never, because it's also, you get into a slippery slope too. And, I know the conversations around tanking kind of came up last year, but you want to win. You want to win all the time. You want to win every rep. You want to win every snap. That's not something that I think is debatable, again, especially when you talk about a young team and a young quarterback. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing that they got all the way to the Super Bowl, because if they're able to use that as a teachable moment, if they're able to use that loss as a teachable moment, I think it will benefit them moving forward.
One more on your way out here. It's rumor mill season, just like that. Free agency is not far away, and we've already touched on some of the potential targets. It's not that this is substantiated by people like yourself that report real news, but I have seen, the Twitterverse, a little bit of Kyle Pitts being linked to the Patriots as a potential tight end fit. What do you think they do around Hunter Henry here?
That is a sneaky, important area of need for them this offseason. I don't think C.J. Dippre is the answer, especially right now. And when you consider the fact you have two pretty good tight ends in Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, who are on the other side of 30, those are hard miles that they put on. I mean, these are not finesse tight ends. These are guys who are asked to do an awful lot in the overall framework of the offense. I don't know if Kyle Pitts is the answer, but again, this is something that they need to address, whether in free agency or at the very least, I would say a day 2 pick. It was kind of like safety last year, where you knew you needed to address safety because you knew they were getting older at that position. They need to figure out a way to get younger at tight end heading into 2026, because I don't think those guys have a lot of snaps left.
Isaiah Likely's another one, just happens to be from Cambridge.
I like it.
You like it?
I like
Get
it. Yeah, it is. I would start looking for, there's also two, Adam, there's a guy who I believe was on injured reserve this year, Brock Lamb, who was a fullback, tight end, hybrid type, who also might be part of the conversation moving forward. Look, I'm not saying that he's going to be, going to catch 80 passes next year, but I think you have to consider all your options at that position going into 2026. The other thing I want to see him get another fullback, or at least a fullback who's a better fit in a Josh McDaniels offense than James Westover was.
Yeah, they only used him 5 times in the Super Bowl, which, I don't know, they were going jumbo all year. What happened there, Chris?
That's it, Joe. I'm right there with you, man. I was surprised that they didn't try out Thayer Mumford and Jack Westover and, run a little bit more jumbo in the Super Bowl, especially against a team like Seattle that appeared committed to, playing an awful lot of nickel all night.
Nate Ebner got a couple games left in him. What do you think?
I don't know who else does.
All in. Call up James Devlin.
Oh, yeah, I loved him. What was the other one? Mark Edwards from years ago. They've had a lot of good ones over the year. We have another good one. It's Christopher Price. Check out all his work at the Boston Globe. Chris, excellent job, man. I don't know what we're going to do without football, but the Combine's right around the corner.
Love it. I'm on a plane in less than a week out to Indy, so I'll talk to you guys soon.
We'll talk to you guys then. He's Christopher Price. Check out all his work over at the Boston Globe. And you know what? We're actually going to do trending now. Because what is
I
trending?
can't wait.
I think so. Wait, are we?
We're made.
We are doing trending next.
Lucy, what
Coming
you
up
got
next.
for us? We'll find out next on Boston Has Entered the Chat.